Around Futian, divine elephants stampeded, rushing toward the giant sword that struck at them. Each divine elephant exerted monstrous power. The giant black swords blasted above the divine elephants, and suddenly cracks appeared on the massive bodies of the divine elephants as they were torn to pieces. Those giant swords dropped down continuously to destroy those galloping divine elephants, and the terrible sound of collision shook this space without ceasing. With the collapse of many divine elephants, the black iron divine sword above Futian's head dropped immediately to attack Futian. Around Futian, divine elephants stampeded, rushing toward the giant sword that struck at them. Each divine elephant exerted monstrous power. The giant black swords blasted above the divine elephants, and suddenly cracks appeared on the massive bodies of the divine elephants as they were torn to pieces. Those giant swords dropped down continuously to destroy those galloping divine elephants, and the terrible sound of collision shook this space without ceasing. With the collapse of many divine elephants, the black iron divine sword above Futian's head dropped immediately to attack Futian. Boom! An extremely terrifying and violent sound came out, and the black iron divine general blasted on the massive bodies of the divine elephants, causing them to tremble. However, a mighty golden brilliance was released from the divine elephants. Their golden bodies held steady and proved indestructible. Futian got up and stood inside the shadow of the divine elephants. He looked at the youth in black on the stone platform in front of him, and a cold, murdering intent flashed across his eyes. Bang! Futian took a step forward, and as his foot landed, in addition to the surging power of the divine elephants, there was also an unparalleled aura so sharp that it was enough to tear all things apart. All three sword will flew back to Futian's side, and above the sky, rivers of swords now appeared, converging upon the sword will. Buzz! Infinite swordsmanship flowed into the sword will as if blended into it. In an instant, every one of those three sword will seemed to contain the terrifying power of swordsmanship from Futian. The attack that just took place was not in its complete form. Get out of here! Looking up, there was a loud rumbling sound that could be heard. Divine elephants that were transformed by the divine wheel of the great path soared into the sky, compelled the black iron divine sword toward the void, which soon pulverized and shattered. Afterward, above the sky, endless rays of golden divine glory bloomed, which actually augmented the divine elephants as they rushed forward. The trumpeting from of elephants was enough to shatter the eardrums of those who heard it, as countless phantoms of these divine elephants rolling forward at the same time. Futian looked at the youth in black who was in front, and continued to move forward. The massive divine elephant stumped down just as the other's black giant sword, which was also made from the divine wheel of the great path, let out a terrible sharp screech, and moving toward the divine elephants. The two collided in the void, causing a terrifying storm to erupt in the surrounding area. It was violent enough to shook the sword peak and the stone platform, but neither collapsed. Many cultivators retreated, because they did not expect such terrifying power could result from these two. Typical cultivators of Lower Renhuang realm would be affected if they stayed around. Buzz! At this moment, those three most brilliant sword will bloomed once again, blending into Futian's power of the great path. The eyes of the youth in black also seemed slightly unsettled. Futian's strength was a bit beyond his expectation, and he was not able to take him down right away. In his mind, his realm should be enough to obliterate his opponent without a doubt. Giant pitch-black swords surrounded his body, majestic and cold. He was still standing in the center, just like someone who was sitting on the throne of swordsmanship. At this moment, rivers of swords flooded the void. He felt a peculiar breath, which instantly covered the area where he was, causing him to shudder. It was icy, and this coldness was able to impact even his spiritual soul. The defense power of his swordsmanship, likewise, was also covered with a layer of frost. It was as if it had been frozen solid by ice. The two men behind him who were of the eighth realm frowned. They seemed to feel a force capable of destroying the youth in black. One of them made a decisive move and raised his sword. Almost at the same instant, the sword will fell, accompanied by a crystalline sound as the dark iron sword defense protecting the youth in black was directly torn to pieces, turning into fragments. The sword will's attack arrived instantly, and the youth in black suddenly felt a strong sense of fear when he saw the imminent arrival of the sword, will as that sword will continued to enlarge in his eyes. Boom! With a loud bang, an even more terrifying, dark divine sword blocked in front of the youth in black, and the three sword will blasted directly on it. Blocked, they were not able to do the damage they intended. Next to the youth in black, a majestic but overbearing cultivator in the 8th realm now appeared. He was staring at Yi Futian coldly. Buzz! The sword will flew back in front of Yi Futian in an instant, chiming loudly, and let out a roar. At this moment, the crowd finally understood what had happened. Everything was happening so fast that in a mere spark of the exchange, everything was already over. And their hearts trembled violently. Just now, was the young man in black almost killed? It turned out that it was the cultivator in the 8th realm, who made a move to save him. They had thought that it might be Yi Futian who would have been killed, and the person who intervened would be the cultivator behind Yi Futian. But what had happened was completely the opposite. The youth in black, who was in the realm of Middle Ren Huang, would have been killed by Yi Futian if it wasn't because of the cultivator behind him, who had blocked that murderous sword will. This space suddenly quieted down, and its silence was almost terrifying. From beginning to end, the youth in black and Yi Futian didn't say much. They were both ruthless men who attacked directly, and more importantly, they aimed to kill. Is this why you are so brave? Yi Futian remarked as he looked at the middle-aged man, standing in front of the man in black. His tone was plain enough, but his words were full of mockery. The man in black attacked Yi Futian most aggressively, but he was almost killed. If it were not for the person behind him, he probably would have been a dead man already. In this confrontation, the youth in black had lost face completely. If he had killed Yi Futian directly, everyone would have just thought of him as an indifferent and cruel killer, who would commit murder for a small matter, and Yi Futian would only appear a pitiful loser. However, the young man in black had almost gotten killed himself, so the whole affair was now somewhat ironic. Another man of the 8th realm cultivation stepped forward and announced loudly, "Those who are not involved, please get back for now." Everyone trembled in their hearts. It seemed that the cultivators of the Black Iron Sword clan were keen to kill Yi Futian. Now that they had already made an exchange, they did not want to let Yi Futian live. The youth in black had extraordinary status. He was the young master of the Black Iron Sword clan, and the son of the current Black Iron Sword Emperor. As for the two cultivators in the 8th realm next to him, one was the eldest disciple of the Black Iron Sword Emperor, and the other one who took action to protect the youth in black was the younger brother of the Black Iron Sword Emperor and the youth's uncle. It was just a small misunderstanding. Why resort to violence? It is not like it's some life or death grievance to begin with. Since no one was hurt, let's just stop here, said the Empress who had exhorted Yi Futian before, intending to persuade both sides to stop. Yi Futian's talent was superb. If they went to war, the possibility of him being killed was great. After all, the power of the Black Iron Sword clan was quite a bit stronger. This whole incident was caused by the Black Iron Sword clan, whose rudeness was the cause of the conflict. However, she also understood that there was no absolute right or wrong in the world of cultivation. No, the eyes of the youth in black was cold, and his murderous intent was stronger than before. If previously he wanted to kill Yi Futian on a whim, now he really wanted to kill him. Thank you for your kindness. Yi Futian looked at the Empress and nodded slightly. However, some people just want to die, so I have to oblige them. The woman stared blankly at both of them. The youth in black and Yi Futian had both rejected her proposal. It seemed that they both thought they could kill the other. You want to die? The youth in black cast a glance at Yi Futian. Yi Futian glanced at the other. He said to Beigong Ao, who was next to him, "You hold them back for a while." "No problem." Beigong Ao nodded. He had become more confident in his own strength. When his voice fell, a monstrous thunder field appeared, and with it, a terrifying phantom of the thunder god, covering this space. Above the sky, the endless thunder wandered, hanging down from the sky and descended on him. He transformed into a body of thunder, which attracted the divine thunder of the great path. All the divine thunder light surrounded him, shaped like countless chains of thunder. The disciple of the Black Iron Sword Emperor took a step forward, and a mighty sword might appeared above the sky. A terrifying sharpness spread, repelling the surrounding cultivators, forcing them to step back, pulling away. A great battle was about to erupt here, but many people were accustomed to it. In Eastern Deity Island, battles of this kind had erupted more often than not. However, this was the first time that battle at this level had occurred here. The Eighth Realm Ren Huang stretched his hand toward the divine sword in the sky, and it was a terrifying black iron divine sword that was branded with terrible sword patterns, which now turned into terrifying black lightning that struck down. Bang bang bang! The light of divine sword fell from the sky, blasting around the area where Yi Futian and the others were, turning it into a black iron prison, sealing this space with its swordsmanship, so that Yi Futian and the others had no way to escape. Afterward, he pointed his finger downward, accompanied by a terrible loud booming sound as the black iron divine sword smashed down. The thunder god of war that was transformed by Beigong Ao now hovered in the air, as endless thunder and lightning wandered, turning into a thunder chain that landed on the black iron divine sword and entangling it. However, it did not block the horrific momentum of the falling divine sword. Dark divine light huffed and puffed, slaying everything in its path. But there was a net of thunder that appeared in the sky beneath, which was destroying all the divine light. Traces of the power of thunder punishment wandered as the method of thousand punishment reached toward the divine sword. Boom! A terrifying loud noise was heard as the divine sword was locked in place in the void, and baptized by the light of 1,000 tribulations, breaking it apart little by little. Seeing this, the cultivators of the Eighth Realm next to the youth in black also walked forward. More terrifying aura now bloomed, and oppressed this space with its might. Yi Futian did not look at the battlefield, but his power from the great path spread out as all 9 stone platforms lit up at the same time, bursting with brilliant rays of swordsmanship. At the same time, the sword peak also lit up, puffing out massive sword will. What's going on? Those Ren Huang who had left the battlefield now trembled when they saw the changes taking place at the sword peak. They looked at Yi Futian, just as the cultivators from the Black Iron Sword clan also turned to look at the sword peak, and suddenly flooded with an ominous premonition. There are great opportunities of the great path in Eastern Deity Island. Why seek death when you can live and cultivate? Said Yi Futian coldly. His voice became particularly grating as it fell in the ears of the youth in black, whose face changed as he turned his head to look at the sword peak. Buzz! From the sword peak, a sword light that pierced through the sky was blooming, rushing straight into the firmament, as its sword will swept out. In an instant, several people from the Black Iron Sword clan, who were closest to the sword peak, were pulverized directly under the sword will and vanished into nothingness. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. What's going on? The cultivators who were watching were in great shock. The terrifying might of the swordsmanship from far away now descended on them. They continued to retreat steadily, only to see that the sword peak seemed to have truly turned into a punishing sword. And the sword will in the sword peak seemed to be urged, erupting in this instant. What's going on? The cultivators who were watching were in great shock. The terrifying might of the swordsmanship from far away now descended on them. They continued to retreat steadily, only to see that the sword peak seemed to have truly turned into a punishing sword. And the sword will in the sword peak seemed to be urged, erupting in this instant. The crowd saw the 9 sword will surrounding the sword peak, causing the sword peak to release an unparalleled sacred brilliance of swordsmanship. When it spread toward its surroundings, a light screen of swordsmanship was generated. It was this brilliant sword screen that had pulverized the cultivators from the Black Iron Sword clan. The 2 cultivators of the Eighth Realm also turned their heads to look at what was happening, and their expressions changed into one of shock. The voice was still lingering in the space, echoing in their ears. Eastern Deity Island contained opportunities of the Great Path. Wouldn't it be much better to stay alive and cultivate there? Why seek death? Yi Futian had said that they were seeking their own deaths. Get back. The 2 made a quick decision. The divine wheel of swordsmanship erupted, and there was a massive black iron divine sword swung at them. A loud rumbling sound came out as if the sky and earth were about to break apart. The sight was most terrifying, and their hands grabbed at the young man in black, wanting to take him away. Their bodies turned into a stream of swordsmanship, evacuating toward the sky above. Buzz! The sword screen swept across, blocked momentarily by the divine sword that had suppressed the great path. When it descended on the stone platform, the men had already withdrawn. On the other side, Futian was suspended in the air with 9 swords surrounding him, and the sword light was most brilliant. Suddenly, the sword peak likewise was surrounded by 9 swords, and the sword will from the center of the sword peak shot straight into the sky. Up! Futian spat. As soon as his voice fell, the sword screen enveloped the boundless space instantly. At this moment, everyone seemed to be inside the sword domain. Even the cultivators from the Black Iron Sword clan, who had fled into the air, were no exception. They felt the sword domain came over them, and their expressions changed into one of shock. Since you are seeking death, why bother leaving? Futian's voice dropped as he pointed his finger toward the sky. Suddenly, above the sword peak, a glow of swordsmanship flooded the space and swept toward the 3 of them. It was almost instant, with no elapse of time. Buzz! The moment the sword light fell, the 3 cultivators from the Black Iron Sword clan were suspended in the void motionlessly. They watched their own bodies slowly vanishing into nothingness, being pulverized. No! The youth in black yelled, and his arrogant face showed incredible fear now. His body was disintegrating, dissipating bit by bit. How could he die here, at the hands of a lower Renhuang? He didn't even know who had killed him, because he didn't ask who Futian was, or where he came from before he attacked. He never thought that it would cost him his life. The cultivators from the Black Iron Sword clan perished because of a lower Renhuang. The final gaze of the 2 8th Realm cultivators was directed at the youth in black, with despair and anger. Their lives were ruined by his arrogance. Why did he have to provoke Futian? They were full of remorse, with immense hatred in their hearts. Futian's voice echoed in their heads. Why did they seek death? The sword light sprinkled down, and the bodies of that 3 powerful Renhunag immediately dissipated, as if blown away by the wind, turning into dust. They had completely disappeared, as if they had never existed. The cultivators from Black Iron Sword clan were annihilated. They didn't know that there was another principality that had a similar experience, the annihilation of the cultivators from the Songhai continent. If they had known, perhaps they would not have been attacking Futian so heedlessly. The sword will return to its place, back to the sword peak. The cultivators in the distance stared at the sword peak, and everything that had just happened seemed like a dream. It was too surreal. Not only did a lower Renhuang of Divine Will 3rd Realm had accomplished what they could not, which was the complete comprehension of the 9 sword will under his own power, but now, he had killed all the cultivators from the Black Iron Sword clan, sparing none of them. If their previous feeling toward Futian was one of envy, surprise, and doubt, then at this moment, there was only one thought in their minds. And that was, where did this person come from, and who he was? No one had any doubts or even envy. There was only shock and awe. Many of them were upper Renhuang of the Divine Will 8th Realm, but they no longer treated Futian as some lower-ranking person. Instead, they now looked at Futian with extreme seriousness. After all, Futian had just cut down 2 cultivators of the 8th Realm. This man was far too outstanding. Previously, many of them had thought of Futian as a young cultivator from some continental major force. However, at this moment, they felt that Futian's origin might just be a little deeper than what they could fathom. The Empress, who had been exhorting Futian before, suddenly felt hot in her face, aside from shock and surprise. She was embarrassed that after she had comprehended just a single sword will, and after failing to convince Futian to give up, she absconded her effort, and pronounced that sword will was far too difficult to comprehend. Was it really that hard? He had comprehended all 9 swords and urged the power of the sword peak to sweep over these cultivators. It made her feel quite ashamed. How embarrassing! And what right did she have to lecture Futian? Those elders who were laughing and chatting before were speechless now. They could only lament in their hearts that the younger generation would always replace the older ones. In this era of genius talents, there were always some amazing characters who would appear out of nowhere. They had no idea which continent had produced such an extraordinary character. In the future, the continent he came from would probably become famous because of him. At the moment, many already believed that Futian would be famous someday, and the continent he was from would be proud of him. Futian surveyed the crowd and said with a smile, "I have disturbed your cultivation, and I apologize. The conflict is over, so please continue as you were." The pointed indifference he had before had disappeared, and that extreme arrogance he displayed before was gone as well. At the moment, there was only a touch of gentle elegance from him, and his demeanor was quite pleasant. Many looked at Futian and found him even more dashing. Perhaps this was the additional effect brought on by the display of his power. Seeing that Futian behaved so casually, everyone nodded and prepared to return. However, someone also remarked, "Seeing our friends so easily comprehended the 9 swords, how dare I continue to stay here to cultivate? I better go to other places and try my luck elsewhere for other opportunities. I wish my friend to gain full control of the sword will within the sword peak." "Thank you." Futian nodded with a smile. He was very polite and pleasant. Many felt that Futian, when not in battle, was a completely different person. "I don't know your name, and where you come from?" an old man asked with curiosity. "My name is Leonian. I am from a continent with no name," Futian responded. Leonian. Everyone secretly took note of the name. The man who asked the question nodded and said, "This continent with no name would perhaps be famous one day because of you." This was a very high praise. If a continent was to be named after someone, then one could only imagine how great of an achievement that must be. Obviously, he favored Futian in particular. This battle had proven Futian's extraordinary talent. Futian smiled without saying anything. It was yet unknown how long he would cultivate in that continent. If nothing happened, it is possible that he would not return there. After all, the goal for this trip to the Divine Prefecture was purely for cultivation only, so that he could step onto the peak of Runhuang realm as soon as possible. Let's not disturb our friend's cultivation. Everyone started to bid their goodbyes and left, and they were all quite courteous. Previous to Futian's exhibition of extraordinary talents, their attitude was one of ridicule, and some were displeased. After all, a lower Runhuang had made a fool of every one of them. But at this moment, such thoughts had vanished as there were only admiration and willing submission. How could they compete with him? They were not at the same level at all. Other Runhuang were coming from afar, rushing over here, attracted by the sword that was unleashed. After all, that sword light was so radiant that many inside Illusory Sky Domain had felt it. After arriving, they had not caught on to the situation, but from the chatters of those around them, they could guess a thing or two, and their attention now focused on Futian. Many extraordinary figures had appeared in other locations, and it seemed that some would also appear here. No one knew who would be the most outstanding figure in this trip to Eastern Deity Island. Would be some cultivator from the older generation? Or would some Runhuang from the younger generation prevail? Presently, somewhere else in the Illusory Sky Domain, many were standing on top of the statues, looking into the distance. Above the tallest statue in the middle, a majestic empress was standing there. Her divine consciousness enshrouded the endless space, including the area where Futian was. She saw everything that happened. "This man is very powerful," the empress said. "Although powerful, but the most outstanding person on this trip to the Eastern Deity Island has to be you, princess," the person next to her remarked. The woman didn't say anything more except, "Don't forget the flowering tree incident before. There were 2 of them, and both were unfathomable." Those next to her were silent. They remembered, of course. In another direction, also in front of an opportunity of the Great Path, a young man stood with his hand folded behind his back. His eyes were looking forward, while the person behind him turned his head, looking into the distance, saying, "Over there at the sword peak, a mighty swordsman had appeared. His comprehension is extraordinary, and he slayed the cultivators from Black Iron Sword clan." "How lethal was he?" asked the young man standing in front. In the realm of Lower Renhuang, he had comprehended the 9 swords one after the other, thus drew on the sword will of the sword peak, and cut down cultivators in the 8th realm, the man responded. The young man nodded slightly. It seems that this trip to Eastern Deity Island will not be uneventful. Aside from them, many had now noticed the existence of Yi Futian. That battle not only shocked the people around Sword Peak, but it also attracted the attention of many cultivators in illusory sky domain, and now they were made aware of the presence of a genius swordsman. But Yi Futian did not care much about any of this. He still concentrated on cultivating with peace in his mind to comprehend the sword will on that sword peak. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In front of the sword peak, Yi Futian sat cross-legged. There were no longer any cultivators on the 9 stone platforms. In front of the sword peak, Yi Futian sat cross-legged. There were no longer any cultivators on the 9 stone platforms. With Yi Futian present, no one was qualified to step onto the stone platforms to cultivate. Everything that had occurred caused the other cultivators to know their limits. Getting on a stone platform to cultivate would just be embarrassing themselves. Many people had left before this, yet many stayed behind and watched Yi Futian cultivate. As time passed by slowly, they saw the sword peak light up once again with brilliant light. The 9 swords circled Yi Futian, and an illusory figure could faintly be seen practicing his swordplay on the sword peak. However, this all appeared somewhat ethereal and did not seem real. Right now, Yi Futian's eyes were tightly shut. He was resonating with the sword peak. The sword will flowed over his body. It seemed as though the sword will on his body was the sword will flowing over the sword peak. An image appeared in his mind. In the vast space he stood there alone. He swung the sword in his hand again and again. Each sword form was different. After countless swings, the 9 forms seemed to merge into one, becoming one sword. Once the sword was swung, tens of thousands of sword shadows appeared. In the sky many sword-shaped paths appeared. Some were fast, and some were slow. Each path was different, Yet the frightening sword shadows pierced the space. When the sword shadows became one, the tens of thousands of sword shadows formed one sword. This sword seemed capable of decimating all things. Right then, terrifying sword light that pierced the heavens appeared on the sword peak. The cultivator felt their hearts suddenly tremble. They then looked at Yi Futian. They also saw a beam of sword light on Yi Futian's figure. It headed straight towards the sword peak. In between Yi Futian and the sword peak, many silhouettes of himself appeared. Each silhouette seemed to stab out with a sword. Rumble! A terrifying thunderclap exploded, seemingly tearing the heavens and earth apart. The next moment, the cultivators astonishingly discovered that the sword peak had already been shattered. Only a beam of sky-piercing sword will was being radiated. Yi Futian, who was initially sitting there, had disappeared from his original spot. When the crowd caught sight of him again, he was on top of the shattered sword peak, standing among the sword will that pierced the sky. It was as though the moment the sword appeared, his person had become a sword and followed the sword as it moved. Even some upper-level renhuangs had not managed to see this clearly. It was so powerful. Was this the ultimate sword form left on the sword peak? The crowd was astonished. Yi Futian was undergoing a baptism by the sword will as he was bathed in sword light. The sword will seemed to want to merge with him completely. His entire person seemed to have become an extremely sharp sword. He was indestructible and was omnipotent. The sword peak actually shattered. No one has managed to do so in so many years. This sword peak has always been here. Now it has been shattered. Someone mumbled while lamenting the fact. I have come here 4 times before. Across 30 years, this sword peak has always been here. Every time I come to Eastern Deity Island, I will come here to comprehend the sword will. After many years, I have eventually comprehended 7 of the 9 sword wills. I initially thought that in another 20 years, I might have a chance to comprehend all the sword wills on the sword peak. I never imagined that one person would make my decades of effort seem like a joke in one attempt, an elder muttered. He continued, I am ashamed. We are all the same. We met 10 years ago. Another elder spoke up. He sighed. His heart was heavy with emotions. They never imagined that one day the fateful encounters of the great path passed down in this place would collapse. Future generations would no longer be able to comprehend them. This lower-level Renhuang had mastered and inherited the sword wills in less than a day. I really want to know what kind of sword it is. A prominent swordsman left it behind. If one can successfully comprehend it, their combat ability will certainly increase. This person has inherited the sword will. His swordsmanship will most likely be several times more powerful than before. The crowd frantically discussed this. They were excited to see a monstrous swordsman appear on Eastern Deity Island. Yet they had also lost a fateful encounter of swordsmanship. It had been destroyed forever. This fellow had extraordinary talent, but he also destroyed a relic of the Great Path, and reaped the benefits alone. He was truly a B****starred. Yet, they also wanted to be him. Unfortunately, they were unable to replicate his success. Yi Futian's body radiated with brilliant sword light. It did so for a long while before gradually dimming. He opened his eyes. Sharp swords seemed to shoot out from his eyes. The humming of swords sounded. One sword had 9 forms, and 9 swords merged into one. No one knew what sword style this technique was from. This sword style could ignore spatial distance and kill in an instant. With the essence of his sword forms, Yi Futian could slay his opponents with just a thought. He would name the sword style of Ichi then. Yi Futian thought to himself, coming up with a name for the sword style. Unending Void, Fleeting and Avicii. These 3 sword styles had extraordinary power, and Yi Futian's accomplishments in swordsmanship were constantly improving. If Fleeting Divine Sword was combined with Avicii, its power might be even more devastating. By combining long-distance and close-quarter attacks, they would certainly become terrifying swords that would massacre their opponents. Yi Futian looked at the sword peak that had disappeared. He then turned towards the crowd. Seeing that the crowd had their gazes focused on him, he could not help but laugh wryly. He said, Apologies, the sword peak shattered on its own. Shattered on its own. The crowd looked at Yi Futian. When they saw that this fellow was apologizing with an innocent face, they really wanted to beat him up. Would the sword peak shatter on its own? It was naturally because of Yi Futian's cultivation. Yet, what could they say when Yi Futian was the one who comprehended the sword will in the sword peak and obtained the fateful encounter of the Great Path? They could only sigh. Yi Futian returned to Xiaqing Yuan and the rest of the group. Emperor Helian and Beigong Ao also smiled as they looked at Yi Futian. This fellow could have just cultivated on his own. Now he had even robbed others of the opportunity to cultivate. You are too cruel, Beigong Ao stated. I was just cultivating on my own, Yi Futian said as he shrugged. You cultivated on your own, but caused others to no longer have a place to cultivate. Fortunately, you only destroyed this sword peak, and there are many more fateful encounters of the Great Path in the illusory sky domain. The rest can try their luck elsewhere, Beigong Ao continued. Yi Futian nodded and said, we should also try our luck elsewhere. The rest of the group nodded in agreement and left. Yi Futian expanded his will, enveloping the vast space. He wanted to find places suitable for them to cultivate in, and that had fateful encounters of the Great Path that they required. Yi Futian's group very quickly arrived at another location. Similarly, there were a lot of people standing around the space. Their gazes were fixed on something ahead. Before the crowd was a huge mountainside. On a cliff, golden characters were carved into the rock. They were obscure and seemed to be written in a special language. Yet by standing there, one could sense Sanskrit chanting of the Great Path coming from it. It gave off intense pressure. These are teachings of Buddhist techniques? Yi Futian said when he sensed the will behind these characters. This power appeared to be the handiwork of Buddhists. From the looks of it, Buddhist cultivators had also previously come to Eastern Deity Island to seek pills. This proved how terrifying the influence of Supreme Deity Donglai was back in the day. There is some text to the side, Xiaqing Yuan exclaimed as she looked at the lower right corner of the cliff face. There was a line of characters carved into the rock face. Yi Futian turned his gaze towards the text. As expected, these golden characters were left behind by a Buddhist monk. He had suffered a severe injury of the Great Path and hence had come to seek medication. Supreme Deity Donglai had cured his injuries of the Great Path. So the Buddhist monk had left behind a set of teachings of Buddhist techniques here, as a form of thanks. There were many people quietly comprehending the characters. Yi Futian saw a woman with extraordinary temperament sitting cross-legged among them. Many Buddhist runes were circling her body, causing her figure to be surrounded by the light of Buddha. She seemed divine and undefilable. Yi Futian looked towards the obscure characters. He faintly felt as though the characters were not text. Aura of the Great Path emanated from his body. He could feel the golden characters on the cliff face more vividly. His gaze became deep beyond comparison. He could see through all falsehoods. Immediately, the characters seemed to leap up and present themselves before him. Musical notes. Yi Futian exclaimed internally. As expected, these characters were not characters, but instead were musical notes. The teachings left on the cliff face were for a musical technique. People who did not cultivate the way of rhythm would most likely find it difficult to comprehend anything. They would not be able to make any head or tail out of it. Why is it that I cannot make out anything from this? Beigong Shuang mumbled. Before this, she could still somewhat understand the sword will of the sword peak. However, she could not make out what was on this cliff face at all. It is normal for you not to be able to understand, someone to the side said with a smile. How many people could understand what they were seeing? It is the same for me, Beigong Ao confessed. Beigong Shuang nodded her head slightly. So even her father could not understand. Then, this technique must certainly be exceptional. She wondered whether Yi Futian could understand it. She looked ahead and saw Yi Futian standing there. He said, "This is the way of rhythm. It is normal if you do not understand." The way of rhythm? Beigong Shuang asked as she revealed a strange look. Do these characters talk about a musical technique? These are not characters. They are musical notes. If you are not a cultivator of this sort of way, it will be difficult for you to comprehend anything. You all do not need to comprehend it, Yi Futian said. Beigong Shuang nodded her head. She looked at Yi Futian somewhat speechless. Before this, Yi Futian had played a song on a guqin on Wudong Island. From the looks of it, he was well versed in the way of rhythm as expected. A few silhouettes behind the female Runhuang turned their gazes towards Yi Futian and said, "It is you. Do you all recognize me?" Yi Futian asked. "We met in the Penglai deity region," the person said with a smile. Before this, when a dispute erupted between Yi Futian and Jun Xiuyan in the Penglai deity region, they were all present. Yi Futian did not say anything. "I was just thinking of him, and he has come," the person spoke again. Yi Futian frowned. Within the range of his will, a vast group of silhouettes was approaching them. At the same time, a cold will immediately descended upon him, containing a murderous intent. Yi Futian did not turn around, but he naturally knew who had come. It was Jun Xiuyan. Jun Xiuyan had brought along many people. Before this, he had exchanged many Eastern deity tokens. Hence, there were countless cultivators on his side. When they arrived, the large group of cultivators caused the other cultivators here to feel pressured. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Aside from Jun Xiuyan's group, another group of cultivators had also arrived here. This group did not have as many members, but each individual had an astonishing temperament. Yi Futian had also encountered the leading youth before. Back in the Penglai deity region, the youth was together with Jun Xiuyan, and the two of them were close. Aside from Jun Xiuyan's group, another group of cultivators had also arrived here. This group did not have as many members, but each individual had an astonishing temperament. Yi Futian had also encountered the leading youth before. Back in the Penglai deity region, the youth was together with Jun Xiuyan, and the two of them were close. After they arrived, they merely cast a sideways glance at Yi Futian. They did not pay him much heed. Their gazes fell on the female Renhuang, who was comprehending the Buddhist musical notes on the cliff face. When they saw the divine light coming from her, Jun Xiuyan and another youth revealed strange looks. It seemed that she might be able to comprehend the characters on the cliff face. "Shangguan, how's your comprehension coming?" the youth asked at that moment. His tone was calm and indifferent. This person was similar to Jun Xiuyan. He was born into a top force of the Penglai continent. The alchemy Qian Yun clan was an extremely terrifying force in the Penglai continent. They were no weaker than the Jun clan. Aside from Jun clan and Yun clan, the female Ren Huang, who was cultivating, was similarly a cultivator from a top force of the Penglai continent, Shangguan clan. In front of the cliff face, cultivators from 3 major forces of the Penglai continent had gathered. In reality, Jun Xiuyan and Yunjia from Yun clan had not come for Yi Futian. They had merely coincidentally bumped into him here. Jun Xiuyan was not too concerned about Yi Futian, even though Yi Futian's cultivation talent was exceptional. Yunjia, you are presumptuous, a Shangguan clan elder said as he frowned behind Shangguan Qiuya. His expression was cold. Yunjia was intentionally disturbing Shangguan Qiuya's cultivation. I came to ask how Shangguan Qiuya's cultivation was going. Why does senior say I'm presumptuous for doing so? Yunjia asked the elder as he looked at him. The elder did not respond. His body released a faint cold aura. The relationship between the few major clans of the Penglai continent was complicated. Yun clan, Jun clan, and their Shangguan clan had always been at odds with each other. Right then, the light on Shangguan Qiuya's figure gradually dimmed. She slowly turned around. Her beautiful gaze was breathtaking as it swept towards Yunjia and Jun Qiuyan. I have comprehended some things. Do you want to join me? Shangguan Qiuya replied Yunjia in a calm tone. Yunjia looked up at the huge cliff face before him. The obscure golden characters were like a riddle. He could not see through them at all. However, they knew from the people around them, and their clan records, that the characters on the cliff face were musical notes. A prominent Buddhist cultivator had carved a Buddhist musical technique here on the cliff face. Based on their clan records, this technique was called the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm. It was an extremely terrifying way of rhythm offensive technique. It could immediately attack the spiritual souls of others. It was especially good at restraining demonic powers. It was an exceptionally overbearing technique of the way of rhythm. Yet, only cultivators who were proficient in the way of rhythm could have a chance of comprehending it. Jun Xiuyan and Yunjia were slightly knowledgeable about the way of rhythm, but were not proficient in this power of the Great Path. They might be able to sense it slightly. However, it was impossible for them to comprehend and cultivate the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm. After looking Shangguan Qiuya in the eye, Yunjia asked Jun Xiuyan, who was beside him, "What do you think? Although we are not proficient in the way of rhythm, there is no harm in trying to comprehend it. All the great paths are interconnected. We might be able to reap benefits that we never imagined." Jun Xiuyan answered as he looked at Shangguan Qiuya. As he said this, he also glanced at Yi Futian, who was to the side. "All right," Yunjia agreed. "Then let's comprehend it for a while. Let us see whether we can comprehend this Vajra demon-slaying rhythm." Vajra demon-slaying rhythm. When the crowd heard Yunjia say this, their hearts trembled. Was this teaching known as the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm? They were cultivators from the major forces of the Penglai continent. They were the forces most familiar with Eastern Deity Island. What they said shouldn't be wrong. Yi Futian repeated the name in his mind. A demon-slaying technique? Jun Xiuyan took a few steps forward. A number of cultivators followed him. Behind them, silhouettes lined up one after another. Their auras were astonishing. They made the cultivators in the space sense a faint pressure. If one looked carefully, they would notice that Yi Futian's group coincidentally had all their escape routes from this place sealed off. Before this, a huge battle had erupted between Yi Futian and Jun clan. He had killed many cultivators from the Jun clan. After stepping into the illusory sky domain, Jun Xiuyan had planned not to let Yi Futian leave alive. Now that there were no goddesses from Eastern Deity Island around, no one would get in Jun Xiuyan's way. He swept a glance at Yi Futian and said, "Don't you have extraordinary talent? Let's comprehend and cultivate together then." Jun Xiuyan allowed Yi Futian to comprehend the characters on the cliff face together with him. Although Jun Xiuyan did not want to admit that Yi Futian was related to the incident of the flowering tree, he knew deep down that it was related to Yi Futian. Yet this was not important. Regardless of whether or not it was Yi Futian, Jun Xiuyan would still kill him. Before taking Yi Futian's life, he would allow Yi Futian to follow him around to comprehend teachings, to see how talented Yi Futian actually was. Yi Futian glanced sideways at Jun Qiuyan and ignored him. He then turned his gaze to the cliff face. He was originally planning to comprehend and cultivate here. What did this have to do with Jun Qiuyan? Did he need Jun Qiuyan's permission to comprehend the characters of the Great Path here? Seeing that Yi Futian was ignoring him, Jun Qiuyan paid him no need, and also turned towards the cliff face. Everything returned to normal. The cultivators present also turned back to the cliff face to attempt to comprehend the characters. Yi Futian also did the same. Will of the Great Path emanated from his body, and sensed the will on the cliff face. At the same time, Yi Futian's eyes became extremely bright. They had an enchanting air around them. For an instant, the golden characters seemed to leap out in his eyes. Musical notes. Yi Futian entered a state of deep focus. His attention was fully focused on the cliff face. Right now, it was as though he had entered a domain of absolute silence. Before him, golden musical notes were leaping around. Will. Yi Futian sensed the existence of a will. It was very clear and distinct. There was will contained within the characters of the Great Path, and the two were well merged with each other. Yi Futian tried hard to sense them. He could sense the musical notes leaping around, but he could not hear their sounds. The most beautiful song is one without sound. The will might have already surpassed the existence of sound. Yi Futian's senses were terrifying. As he sensed them, the characters seemed to come alive. They became golden characters that danced in the air, seemingly playing a melodious tune. However, there was no sound at all. At least, Yi Futian could not hear anything. There were musical notes, but there was no sound. Even so, on Yi Futian's body golden light shone. It seemed as though he was forging a golden body. His entire body began to sparkle. This scene caused Beigong Ao and others to reveal strange expressions. No matter how exceptional a talent Yi Futian displayed now, they would no longer be surprised. However, what made them truly speechless was that he was not just displaying outstanding talent. It was the fact that he seemed to be able to master and cultivate all sorts of powers of the Great Path that surprised them. Now he was actually also proficient in the way of rhythm. Then, was there a power of the Great Path that he could not cultivate? This time, Yi Futian was comprehending something much more difficult to comprehend than swordsmanship. He sensed the musical notes, and only managed to faintly grasp something after a long while. The most beautiful song is one without sound. The way of rhythm did not necessarily require sounds to be heard. The Vajra demon-slaying rhythm controlled the rhythm of sounds. When the sounds of the Great Path reached another level, Yi Futian might not even be qualified to hear those sounds. His plane was too low. That was why he couldn't hear the sounds. Yi Futian thought to himself. Although he could not hear them, his sensory ability was powerful, and he could sense the rhythm of the musical notes. Through this rhythm, he could still cultivate. At that moment, Yi Futian became even more absorbed into his cultivation. He became completely focused as he sensed the rhythm of the first set of musical notes. Everyone in this space was comprehending the musical notes. However, most of them failed to grasp the main points. A middle-level Run Huang lamented, "I have cultivated the way of rhythm for many years. I sense that this rhythm is extraordinary. It is definitely a powerful musical technique. Alas, I cannot grasp its main points. I am destined to miss this opportunity." As he said this, he let out a long sigh. He finally decided to give up. He turned to leave. "Are you leaving?" someone asked. "I am," the elder replied without turning back. "I wonder whether anyone can manage to comprehend this musical technique within a century." It was difficult, too difficult. He had delved into the way of rhythm for many years, and was considered a master-level figure. Yet he could only grasp the surface of this technique. From his perspective, with the difficulty of this technique of the way of rhythm, even if Eastern Deity Island were to be opened up to the outside world 10 times, it might be that no one would successfully cultivate it. However, at that moment, a formless rhythm swept out, causing the elder to stop in his tracks. He then turned around and looked at the cliff face. He saw the first set of golden characters seemingly leap off the cliff face. The characters radiated brilliant golden light. The characters emitted sound waves of the Great Path, which instantly swept through the space. Everyone could clearly sense the power of the sound. Who did it? The elder's beard fluttered in the wind. His gaze suddenly became extremely sharp. He glanced around at the crowd as his heart wavered. Someone had managed to comprehend the musical notes. Although it was only the first step, it was a start. With such a place to start from, comprehending this riddle would be a possibility. His gaze turned toward Wuxia. Prior to this, only she had managed to resonate with the cliff face. If anyone had managed to succeed, she had the highest likelihood of doing so. However, right now, Wuxia similarly felt her heart tremble. Her beautiful eyes opened, and she stared at the cliff face. The wave of the great path made her feel an intense sense of awe. This was the result that she had tried to achieve by comprehending so hard. Yet, before she had reached this step, someone else had beaten her to it. Who managed to do it? She also looked around at the crowd. Seeing her reaction, the elder immediately understood that it was not Wuxia who had done so. Who exactly did it? Many people opened their eyes and surveyed their surroundings. There were even some people who started whispering to each other. They had all sensed what had happened just now. Wuxia glanced at Junshuyan and Yunjia. It couldn't be those two, could it? The two of them were looking at Wuxia. Yunjia looked at her in suspicion. He then smiled and asked, "It wasn't you?" Wuxia did not need to ask any more to know that it wasn't them. Then who could it be? Who was still cultivating? Her gaze swept across the crowd and eventually landed on a silhouette. The figure had white hair and was dressed in white robes. His gaze was still fixed on the cliff face, seemingly absorbed to the point that he couldn't pull himself away from looking at it. This person was Futian. He was also one of the few cultivators who were unperturbed and were still comprehending the musical notes. Wuxia naturally was suspicious of him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Wuxia saw that Futian was not distracted and was extremely engaged in his cultivation. A strange look flashed past in her eyes. Wuxia saw that Futian was not distracted and was extremely engaged in his cultivation. A strange look flashed past in her eyes. Before this, in the Prunglai deity region, Futian had killed the cultivators of the Jun clan with his sword will. His ability was extraordinary. In her opinion, Junshuyan was far inferior to Futian. Now, Futian was comprehending here. He must also be proficient in the way of rhythm. Therefore, the possibility of Futian activating the golden runes was very high. It was because Futian and Junshuyan were the only few new visitors here. The rest of the cultivators had long been here. Before Futian arrived, she was the one who had the deepest understanding of the cliff face. Wuxia turned around and cast a glance at Junshuyan. Her indifferent gaze communicated a slight hint of disdain. She seemed to be mocking him. Junshuyan had been despising Futian, but in reality, if Junshuyan weren't the descendant of the Jun clan of the Prunglai continent, he would pale into insignificance when compared with Futian. Junshuyan frowned and narrowed his eyes. His gaze was dead set on Futian. The doubt in his mind surfaced once again. Whom did the flowering tree blossom for? His gaze turned icy sharp in an instant. An aura of the great path touched Futian. Futian, who had been comprehending the golden runes, was disturbed by this aura of the great path. His meditation was brought to a halt. A cold look flashed past in his eyes. The musical notes in this Vajra demon-slaying rhythm were ethereal and hard to comprehend. Futian needed to devote all his attention to his meditation and could not be distracted. Its level of difficulty was much higher than that of when he was comprehending the sword wills. Therefore, when Junshuyan interfered with an aura of the great path, Futian was alarmed and withdrew from his meditation right away. Futian's gaze shifted. He looked at Junshuyan. The latter was similarly staring at him. When Yunjia, who was standing beside Junshuyan, noticed the abnormality between them, he revealed a strange expression. He pondered out loud while staring at Futian. Did he cause this to happen? He scrutinized Futian. The glow of the golden runes on the cliff face dimmed, as though they had lost their color. The aura of the golden runes also ceased fluctuating. When Yunjia saw this, His expression turned even more uneasy. So it was really this fellow? Jun Xiuyan, it seems like you have keen eyes. You wanted to recruit him into your team and cultivate in Eastern Deity Island. Unfortunately, he didn't appreciate your offer, Yunja commented with a smile. However, his rejection was no surprise. With his talent to comprehend the fateful encounters of the Great Path, there's no reason for him to be the cat's paw. He is just lucky, Jun Xiuyan retorted. You should continue to comprehend. Right now, Jun Xiuyan would not attack Yi Futian. He would let him continue his meditation. Yi Futian glared at Jun Xiuyan. Right now, another voice was transmitted into Yi Futian's mind, saying, I am Shangguan Qiuya, from Shangguan clan of the Prenglai continent. May I know how I should address you? Yi Liunian. Yi Futian glanced at Shangguan Qiuya, who was to the side. She was the one who was talking to him via sound transmission. Ren Huangyi, Shangguan Qiuya said. The musical technique that is carved on this cliff face is the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm. Each and every golden rune is a musical note. Just now, Ren Huangyi managed to activate a musical note. Are you able to comprehend all the musical notes here? I am not sure, Yi Futian replied. What was the intention of this Shangguan Qiuya? Jun Xiuyan allowed you to continue comprehending the technique. If you actually manage to comprehend it, he will certainly capture you and force you to reveal the method to do so. Why don't you work with me? If you can comprehend the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm, my Shangguan clan is willing to ensure your safety, Shangguan Qiuya offered. As for the conditions, she did not need to explain. She naturally was after the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm that he managed to comprehend. This technique was priceless. For Shangguan clan to protect Yi Futian, he had to first comprehend the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm on the cliff face. It still depends on whether I can comprehend it in the first place, Yi Futian replied. He neither agreed to nor refused her offer. Since both Jun Xiuyan and Shangguan Qiuya wanted to see him comprehend it, he naturally would not disappoint them. Yi Futian ignored them and continued facing the cliff face to comprehend and cultivate. However, Beigong Ao, Emperor Helian, and the others were cautiously guarding beside Yi Futian. They naturally could tell that Yi Futian needed to delve into his task. They could not comprehend this way of rhythm themselves. Hence, they might as well not try and instead protect Yi Futian, preventing the other parties from attacking him. After all, on Eastern Deity Island, anything could happen. Yi Futian started again, comprehending the first set of golden runes. When he looked at the cliff face, he entered a miraculous realm. It was as though there were only him and the musical notes. The rhythm of musical notes swept out, and the golden musical notes leaped up. From them, Yi Futian could sense the aura of the Great Path. Sensing this rhythm, Yi Futian seemed to hear a very faint sound. This sound could not be heard with his ears. Instead, he used his mind and will to sense it. Through the rhythm of the musical notes, he could sense the sound of the musical rhythm. If his attainments in musical rhythm were high enough, he might be able to hear it clearly. Alas, the current hymn could yet do so. A formless wind swept over the area. The cultivators who stood before the cliff face were quietly sensing it. They could also sense the will of the rhythm. It had an indescribable sensation to it. It seemed like the rhythm of sound, but they could not hear it. How bizarre. Many people thought to themselves. Some more senior figures revealed strange looks. The upper-level Ren Huang from Shangguan clan stared at the cliff face and said, Rumor has it that some top-tier musical techniques can kill without any form or trace. This Vajra demon-slaying rhythm is one such top-tier musical technique. Its formless rhythm sweeps out and shatters the spiritual souls of its opponents. That means to say, we have already felt the rhythm of the music, but we just can't hear it, someone said to the side. The crowd nodded their heads slightly as they continued to quietly sense this rhythm. As time passed, another set of runes lit up with golden divine halos. From them, another intense rhythm emanated, causing many people to reveal surprised looks. Jun Xiuyan had a very cold look in his eyes. He swept a glance at Yi Futian. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. However, he did not stop Yi Futian from cultivating. Instead, he allowed Yi Futian to proceed. When Yi Futian finished cultivating, If he could comprehend the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm, it would not be too late to capture him then. That way, Yi Futian could at least be of use to them. They would reap the benefits of his hard work. Right now, Jun Shuyan was feeling conflicted. He hoped Yi Futian would be able to comprehend the technique, and hoped that he would not be able to. Deep within, he did not want to see Yi Futian's talent actually be so outstanding. He would appear very ordinary next to Yi Futian. Nevertheless, regardless of what he was thinking, on the cliff face, more and more golden characters appeared. They shone brightly, and gradually, the space before the cliff face seemed to be lit with frightening divine light. From this divine light, many golden characters appeared. Formless waves radiated outwards like waves on the sea, sweeping out into the space in front of the cliff face. Yi Futian was completely absorbed in his task. He was in his own world. It was as though he was in an independent space. Countless musical notes floated around his figure. Miraculous Buddhist chanting circled him. He did not fully understand what was happening. The frightening rhythm spread out in all directions. The countless characters seemed to weave into a pattern. The image of a golden Buddha statue could faintly be seen. The Buddhist chanting of the Great Path seemed to be coming from the Buddha statue. The cliff face slowly lit up with brilliant divine halos. It lit up the entire space. The cultivators standing before the cliff face were filled with awe and wonder. Yi Futian had actually managed to activate the runes on the cliff face. They looked around them and felt a sensation. It was as though they were all enveloped by a formless rhythm. The golden halos were everywhere like silky threads. The threads enveloped the vast space like a domain of the Great Path. Beigong Shuang looked around her. She then looked towards Yi Futian. As expected, there was nothing that he could not do. Shengguan Shuya was also absorbed in cultivating. Such an opportunity was even more suitable for comprehending the technique. She could rely on Yi Futian's comprehension to sense the cliff face even more clearly. She also managed to comprehend a few sets of runes. A formless rhythm circled her figure. Jun Shuyan sensed everything that was occurring before him. He revealed a sullen look. Nearby, Yunja looked at him and said, "Such comprehension is most likely rare even in the Prunglai continent. Such a shame." Jun Shuyan became even more sullen when he heard Yunja's words. He naturally could tell that Yi Futian managed to do something that even Shengguan Shuya had not been able to. A powerful aura radiated outwards. It emanated from where Yi Futian was. However, at that moment Beigong Ao, who had always been on guard, took a step forward and came to Yi Futian's side. His aura of the Great Path emanated outwards and enveloped the space, not allowing others to disturb Yi Futian. "That should be enough," Jun Shuyan roared. His voice was like thunder. The space trembled violently. It seemed to scatter the formless rhythm. Yi Futian was absorbed in cultivating the way of rhythm. Suddenly, a loud roar swept over him and caused his focus to waver slightly. Yi Futian was indifferent to Jun Shuyan's disturbance. A formless rhythm swept out and pushed back the loud roar. Yi Futian's lips moved slightly as he said in a cold tone, "Get lost." When he said this, it was like a divine voice of the Great Path. Everything he said had to be carried out. A terrifying rhythm swept out and instantly flooded Jun Shuyan's body. His expression changed drastically. The terrifying rhythm immediately attacked his spiritual soul. Buddhist chanting circled him, attempting to directly shatter his spiritual soul. Rumble. There was a loud rumble, and Jun Shuyan's figure was immediately sent flying backward from the shockwave. He coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood. The expressions of the surrounding people changed drastically. Their figures dashed forward, but Jun Shuyan still fell to the ground. His face was pale. Jiu Chuyan's gaze turned extremely sullen. He swept a glance at Yi Futian. He was still cultivating there. He had injured Jiu Chuyan without even moving at all. This scene could only be appropriately described as Jiu Chuyan humiliating himself. He was pathetic. Many people thought to themselves as they looked pitifully at Jun Chuyan. The heir of the Jun clan of the Prunglai continent was humiliated in such a fashion. This incident would surely be known throughout the Prunglai continent. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Jun Qiuyan got up. His sullen gaze was filled with murderous intent as he stared at Yi Futian. Jun Qiuyan got up. His sullen gaze was filled with murderous intent as he stared at Yi Futian. However, right now, Yi Futian seemed to ignore Jun Qiuyan's existence completely. He faced the cliff face, giving off the feeling as though Jun Qiuyan was a jester. Jun Qiuyan had kept provoking him, but was injured with just a word from Yi Futian. Jun Qiuyan felt his face turn red hot. His murderous intent was menacing. Around him, many cultivators looked towards Yi Futian. They had cold and indifferent gazes. They stepped forward, and instantly, a furious pressure of the great path enveloped the endless space. It covered the entire area in front of the cliff face. This caused the cultivators in front of the cliff face to frown. They felt slightly dissatisfied. Yi Futian was unperturbed. However, Shengguan Xiuya, who had been cultivating, was awakened, being pulled out from her cultivation state. Her gaze shifted as she turned and coldly swept a glance at Jun Qiuyan and his men. In a cold and indifferent tone, she said, "If you want to cultivate, do it quietly. If not, get lost." She had just said this when a similarly furious aura swept out from her. It became a rhythm of the great path that struck against Jun Qiuyan's body. Jun Qiuyan took a step backward. Aura emanated from his body and circled his figure. The clothes on his body fluttered and danced frenziedly. He stared at Shengguan Xiuya, who had turned around. His gaze was as cold as ice. Another person was asking him to get lost. Before this, Yi Futian had humiliated him with these words. Now, he had heard Shengguan Xiuya uttering these very same words. Since when had Jun Qiuyan ever suffered such humiliation? "If you are not cultivating, then don't disturb others," an 8th-tier cultivator said lazily. He did so without looking at Jun Qiuyan. Yet his voice was heard by everyone present. His intentions were the same as Shengguan Xiuya. He did not want to see Jun Qiuyan and his group rampaging around here. Or it should be said that he did not want them to disturb Yi Futian from cultivating. Right now, Yi Futian was comprehending the characters on the cliff face and activating them. This caused the others to be able to sense the characters even more clearly than before. Many people could then comprehend the rhythm of the musical notes. This was some help to their cultivation. As long as they could begin comprehending, they could slowly make progress, and would at least have a chance at comprehending the technique. However, Jun Qiuyan was wreaking havoc here. They were naturally dissatisfied with him. Although many people remained silent, faint pressure of the great path similarly emanated from their bodies. The people present here were all powerful renhuangs from different continents. They were fewer in numbers, hence their objection was subtle, and they did not dare to defy Jun Qiuyan outright. Among the cultivators here, many of them were from powerful forces of various continents. They were all proud people, so they naturally could not stand someone acting high and mighty. With just one word, you were forced back and coughed up fresh blood. "Jun Qiuyan, if I were you, I would run away as far as I can. How could I possibly show my face here?" Shengguan Xiuya continued to chastise him mercilessly. She was also a member of a top force from the Penglai continent. Although there was friction between them, she believed that the members of the Jun clan did not dare to lift a finger against her. Moreover, there were several cultivators from the Shengguan clan on Eastern Deity Island. "Shengguan, you are going overboard," Yunja said as he looked at Shengguan Xiuya. "You are also a cultivator from the Penglai continent, yet you are siding so much with the other party. Are you trying to flatter the other party because you received an epiphany in your cultivation? Could it be that you hope that he will instruct you in your cultivation? You too. If you want to cultivate, then keep quiet. If you don't want to cultivate, get lost from this region." Shengguan Xiuya similarly scolded Yunja in a cold and indifferent tone as she glared at him. Her words caused Yunja to fall silent. He stared at her, the corners of his mouth revealing a hint of a cold smile. "Elder brother Jun, what shall we do?" he asked as he looked at Jun Qiuyan. Jun Qiuyan swept a glance across the crowd. Although many cultivators had released their auras of the great path, he could clearly tell that few truly dared to stand against him. The cultivators still valued their lives. Jun Qiuyan did not believe that these people were not afraid to die. Yi Futian was also continuing to comprehend, and was relying on the way of rhythm of the cliff face. Jun Shuyan could not wait any longer. An overbearing and sharp look flashed past Jun Shuyan's eyes. He looked around at the crowd and loudly proclaimed, "Those who are not involved with the affairs of Jun clan of the Punlai continent, please vacate this area temporarily. Once we settle our affairs, you may return to cultivating. I apologize for disturbing you all." As Jun Shuyan said this, he waved his hand, and immediately, figures stepped out and dispersed to different directions. The 100 over cultivators that he had brought to Eastern Deity Island with many Eastern Deity tokens dispersed. For a moment, vast pressure enveloped the space before the cliff face, bearing down on the crowd. Jun clan of the Punlai continent wishes to settle some matters. I hope that you may show us some face. Please move, an 8th tier cultivator loudly proclaimed beside Jun Shuyan. His voice was loud and could be heard far and wide. His words caused the eardrums of the crowd to tremble. A suffocating pressure enveloped the space. Many people felt the urge to retreat. Some weaker renhuangs were already leaving. This matter was originally unrelated to them. They naturally had no reason to get caught up in this mess. They swept a glance at Jun Shuyan. They never imagined that while the crowd was against him, Jun Shuyan could still act so domineering. His way of doing things was extremely decisive, sharp, and overbearing. As expected, cultivators dashed away one by one. Although the cultivators here were top figures of their respective continents, they were all from different forces, and had not coalesced into a single force. They would naturally have their own opinions, and would not act united. After all, there were no major benefits involved. Hence, most people chose to retreat. Yunja, when the fight begins, can the cultivators of Yun clan help us hold the line? Jun Shuyan asked Yunja, who was standing beside him. In reality, he was hinting to Yunja to block off those who tried to escape after the battle started, and kill them all off together. This would continue to exert tremendous pressure on those who did not leave. No problem. Leave it to me, Yunja answered immediately, making a prompt decision without any hesitation. Why would he mind when he did not need to get involved while the two forces were fighting? There was also the Shangguan clan. Yunja wanted to see a huge fight erupt between the Jun clan and the Shangguan clan. That way both sides would weaken each other. Yunja waved his hands, and the cultivators of the Yun clan flew up high into the sky. They stood in different positions. Their auras of the Great Path emanated from their bodies and enveloped this space. The two top forces of the Punlai continent had joined forces. From the looks of it, Jun Shuyan was adamant about capturing Futian. Please move quickly, everyone. If you have not left when the fight begins, then you do not need to leave at all. Jun Shuyan cried out again in a cold tone, causing people to constantly leave the place. Before the cliff face, there were very few people left. There were just a few cultivators. But most importantly, there were three major factions. They were the cultivators of Dongyuan Pavilion, led by Futian, the Shangguan clan led by Shangguan Choya, and Jun Shuyan's cultivators. He was still cultivating. Many people looked towards Futian. A fight was about to ensue, and yet, Futian seemed to be completely unaware. He was actually still comprehending the technique on the cliff face, without any distractions. He continued to cultivate peacefully. This scene caused many people to lament. This person's cultivation talent was already so miraculously high that his state of mind was also supernatural. It was just that no one knew how he was going to survive this predicament. Shangguan Choya had a cold and indifferent gaze. She similarly waved her hands, and immediately, cultivators stood before the cliff face, facing off against the cultivators of Jun clan. However, their formation was much weaker than the Jun clans. Jun Shuyan had come prepared this time. He had brought many cultivators to Eastern Deity Island. There were the renhuangs of Jun clan, and the cultivators who had no Eastern Deity tokens, and had either relied on them, or collaborated with them to enter Eastern Deity Island. The Shangguan clan's cultivators could not hold off so many opponents. They could only choose to stand before Jun Shuyan, and the group of cultivators beside him. Two terrifying pressures collided in the space between these two forces. Jun Shuyan swept a glance at Shangguan Choya and said, "Shangguan, do you truly believe that I wouldn't dare lay a finger on you? You can try." Shengguan Shuya responded. Her gaze was cold and proud. Jun Shuyan waved his hand. A few powerful Renhuangs immediately faced off with the Shengguan clan cultivators. In a cold tone, Jun Shuyan ordered, "If anyone interferes with the affairs of Jun clan, kill them without mercy." Understood. The Renhuangs replied as they nodded their heads. Their imposing manners were terrifying. Both sides were domineering and were unwilling to back down. On the other side, Yunja led his cultivators and surrounded the region. He looked down at the conflict below with a sinister look in his eyes. From the looks of it, today's incident would be interesting to observe. He could not wait to see how it played out. Jun Shuyan did not care about what Shengguan Shuya thought. If the cultivators of the Shengguan clan got in his way, he would then not need to show mercy. Jun Shuyan swept a glance at Futian, who was still cultivating. Jun Shuyan's gaze was filled with murderous intent. However, he would not kill Futian for now. "Capture him. I want him alive. You can cripple him," Jun Shuyan commanded. His voice was as cold as ice. After he finished saying this, a vast pressure of the Great Path immediately swept out towards Futian. Around Futian, the expressions of Beigong Ao, Emperor Helion, and the others all changed. Although they had released their own power of the Great Path to block the incoming pressure, their opponents had extraordinary abilities. Beigong Ao, Emperor Helion, and the others could not withstand them at all. Attack! In midair, attacks of the Great Path immediately came crashing down. There was terrifying lightning, brilliant sword light, as well as palm strikes that ripped apart the space. The extremely violent attacks rained down like a frenzied torrent, immediately crashing down towards the space where Futian and his group were. Rumble! Beigong Ao stood high in the sky, lightning surrounded him, and he became a war god of thunder. Endless lightning burst forth, and he used the might of lightning to fend off all the attacks. At the same time, on the cliff face, extremely dazzling light suddenly burst forth. All of the characters of the Great Path lit up with brilliant divine halos of the Great Path simultaneously. Formless storms of musical rhythm swept out. At that moment, everyone faintly felt a formless rhythm in the space. Buddhist chanting circled them and entered their ears. This rhythm was formless, yet it was everywhere. This was the power of sound. Blinding light radiated from the cliff face. At that moment on the cliff face, a towering Buddha statue could faintly be seen. It was as though an ancient Buddha had appeared. His golden body sparkled, and countless characters of the Great Path circled him. This Buddha was chanting Sanskrit, and his voice swept out across the space. Tui. In the space before the cliff face, a Renhuang attacking Futian immediately coughed up fresh blood. His spiritual soul was shattered, and his body fell lifelessly to the ground. He had perished instantly. Tui! 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 Next, one by one, figures fell to the ground. When the rhythm swept past the minds of the lower-level Renhuangs, their spiritual souls immediately shattered, and they died. They could not put up any resistance at all, immediately perishing. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The people who were attacking suddenly stopped. Currents of the Great Path rampaged around in the air. However, the crowd was silent as they saw the figures plummeting to the ground one by one. The people who were attacking suddenly stopped. Currents of the Great Path rampaged around in the air. However, the crowd was silent as they saw the figures plummeting to the ground one by one. In an instant, all the lower-level Renhuangs who attacked Futian were dead. They had all been killed. The rhythm of the Great Path circled around them. They could not hear the musical rhythm, but they could sense its presence. It was as though Buddhist chanting surfaced in their minds without any warning. All around them, the golden light of Buddha shone. When they saw the cliff face again, they could all see the Buddha statue. It made them want to bow down and worship it. The Buddha statue had a very overbearing air to it. It even gave off a fierce vibe. This was a demon-slaying Buddha. The technique it was using was the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm. The golden Buddha had an angry look and imposing manner that caused others to shiver and cower in its presence. The Renhuangs looked at the Buddha. Many weaker Renhuangs felt the urge to escape. It was very dangerous here. A slight moment of carelessness could cause them to be killed off by the way of rhythm. Shangguanshuya looked back at Yi Futian, revealing an astonished look. He was too powerful. Not only did he manage to comprehend the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm, he immediately activated the golden musical notes on the cliff face. He turned them into Wei and unleashed its powerful might. He directly relied on the will of the great path in the cliff face to unleash his attack. Such talent was simply extraordinary. Although Beigong Shuang and the others were also astonished, they were already used to such events. This was not the first time they had witnessed such a scene. This fellow wasn't human. It was as though there was nothing that he could not do. It all began with him making the Dongyuan Pavilion statue manifest. Only then did they realize that for Yi Futian, making the Dongyuan Pavilion statue manifest was nothing. On Eastern Deity Island, he was utilizing his talents to the fullest. The rhythm of the Great Path circled around them and was everywhere. It was as though Yi Futian was ready to launch another attack at any moment. Jun Shuyan's expression turned extremely sullen. He looked in the direction where Yi Futian was and noticed that the latter still had his back facing the rest of them. Yi Futian faced the cliff face. He seemed to be still immersed in comprehending the great path on the cliff face. Jun Shuyan felt like his existence was but a joke. He served as a foil to Yi Futian's extraordinary talent. Attack! Kill him! Jun Shuyan ordered someone through sound transmission. This time, Jun Shuyan did not plan to spare Yi Futian's life. He had changed his mind and had decided to eradicate Yi Futian completely. Before they came to the face of the cliff, Jun Shuyan had still intended to capture Yi Futian alive. However, this now seemed impossible. Hence, he might as well kill off Yi Futian. No one else heard Jun Shuyan's voice, and no one knew what he was thinking. Jun Shuyan used the sound transmission of the Great Path. Therefore, only the person that he had targeted received his order. However, the recipient was also puzzled as to why Jun Shuyan was so confident. At this very moment, Jun Shuyan was actually still plotting to kill Yi Futian. The light of Buddha surrounded Yi Futian while countless musical notes danced around his body. Yi Futian ignored everything happening around him and focused solely on his meditation. An exceptional cultivator stood not far away from where Yi Futian was. The cultivator was a 7th-tier upper-level Ren Huang. He wielded a spear and had domineering, chiseled features. His spear was sharp and was pointed at the people who were rushing towards Yi Futian. The spear emanated a terrifying destructive power. The wielder of the spear was none other than Yang Dongqing. Buzz! Right at this moment, Yang Dongqing's body shifted. He turned into an alarming bolt of silver lightning. However, he was not dashing towards the enemy. Instead, he headed for Yi Futian. Yi Futian had his back facing them. Moreover, he was activating the way on the cliff face. He was unaware of the action of those around him. Black Wind Condor let out a shriek, while the facial expressions of Helian Yu and Beigong Shuang changed drastically. The cultivators around them were still in a daze. What was happening exactly? Wasn't Yang Dongqing a member of Yi Futian's group? The crowd was somewhat lost at this turn of events. A shocking destructive power burst forth from the silver spear. It traversed the space within a split second and left behind a dazzling silver trail. Everything happened too quickly. Yang Dongqing attacked at such a close range in an instant. Nobody was quick enough to react to his attack. When Jun Shuyan saw this scene, a glint of ruthless killing intent flashed past in his eyes. Perhaps even Yi Futian was unaware of this. In reality, everything had always been within Jun Shuyan's control. Although Jun Shuyan had promised Bai Mu to let Yi Futian go prior to this, now that they had entered Eastern Deity Island, Jun Shuyan was determined to kill Yi Futian. Even if he did not manage to kill Yi Futian on Eastern Deity Island, he would not let Yi Futian leave the Penglai continent alive. After entering Eastern Deity Island, he did not send people to follow Yi Futian. Everything was already within his control. Yang Dongqing had already turned traitor and was willing to follow the Jun clan. He also seemed not to be asking for much. Yang Dongqing, a cold voice cried out. It was the sound of Emperor Helian. He had not imagined that Yang Dongqing would betray them now and suddenly attack them. This attack would definitely be fatal. Yi Futian was basically defenseless. He had his back towards the others and was relying on the power of the cliff face to deal with the other cultivators. How could he know that Yang Dongqing was trying to backstab him? If Yi Futian died, everything would be over. How could he possibly block this killing blow? As Emperor Helion cried out, a swooshing sound could be heard. The long spear stabbed directly into Yi Futian's back. It was too fast. Yi Futian had no time to react at all. Right then, Yang Dongqing had a cold look in his eyes. He had been merciless and swift. This attack was executed decisively, without a trace of hesitation. This spear would determine the fate of him and Yang clan. Back at the Prunglai deity lake, conflict had erupted between Yi Futian and Jun Xiuyan, a member of one of the top forces of the Prunglai continent. Yang Dongqing believed that Yi Futian was highly unreasonable. Although Yi Futian had great talent, he was too proud and looked down on everyone else. If this continued, those around him would eventually be dragged into his mess. If the conflict intensified, the cultivators of Jun clan of the Prunglai continent would descend upon their continent. His Yang clan would face terrible consequences then. Hence back then, Yang Dongqing had communicated with Jun Xiuyan through thought transmission. Compared to Emperor Helion and Beigong Ao, Yang Dongqing was the person that Yi Futian trusted the least. Yang Dongqing naturally could tell. After they entered Eastern Deity Island, Beigong Ao had received benefit after benefit, and he had even broken through to the next plane. All of this served to solidify Yang Dongqing's resolve. If Yi Futian did not die, he might get them involved in his mess. If Yi Futian died and Yang Dongqing stood on Jun clan's side, Beigong Ao and Emperor Helion would all be buried here. When that happened, not only would Yang Dongqing control the Dongyuan Pavilion, he could also immediately become the most powerful person on the continent. He could directly control the entire continent, controlling Helion royal family, as well as Beigong family. Aside from that, Yang Dongqing would also become friends with Jun Xiuyan and form an alliance with the Jun clan of the Prunglai continent. His position would be extremely stable, and no one could usurp him. No matter how he considered the issue, killing Yi Futian was the way to go. Hence he had acted so decisively. His eyes showed no hint of hesitation. After this attack, the battle was decided. He had not even considered that he would fail. At such a close distance, with his 7th tier all-out attack, how could he possibly fail? There was no chance of him failing. Yi Futian was sure to die. As Yang Dongqing's spear landed, he looked up, preparing to witness the death of Yi Futian personally. However, the spear had yet to pierce through Yi Futian's figure, when it seemed to have hit an indestructible wall. This caused Yang Dongqing to frown. It was a ritual implement. Yi Futian actually had a ritual implement on him that was protecting his body. Even so, a ritual implement could only weaken his attack power. It was impossible for it to ignore his attack completely. This attack could still kill Yi Futian. Bang! As expected, Yi Futian's figure was sent flying forwards from the impact. Yang Dongqing's spear also moved forwards with Yi Futian's body. It continued forwards, frenziedly unleashing a furious, destructive aura that attempted to destroy Yi Futian completely. Yet, at that moment, a layer of frost instantly covered the spear, and even spread out towards Yang Dongqing's figure. It immediately seeped into his body and even his spiritual soul. Yi Futian still had the strength to resist? Yang Dongqing's expression changed slightly. At that moment, countless golden musical notes from all around him flashed with blinding light. The musical notes of the great path swept straight out towards him. Kill. When this word was uttered, the terrifying musical notes of the great path immediately invaded Yang Dongqing's mind. His expression changed drastically as his spiritual soul tried to withstand this power. Almost at the exact same instant, countless leaves circled around his body. The power of Yin seeped into his body and froze him stiff. His entire body was shivering, and even his thoughts seemed to gradually slow down. How could this happen? How did Yi Futian not die even after all this? Emperor Helion and Beigong Ao initially wanted to make a move. However, when they saw this scene, they were also stunned, stopping in their tracks. Above Yi Futian's figure, endless sword will infused with the Yin divine light shot forwards, and directly penetrated Yang Dongqing's body without any resistance. Yang Dongqing's mind seemed to stop. He felt that all this was somewhat preposterous. Even with such a sneak attack, he had actually been unable to kill a lower-level Renhuang. Instead, he had been killed off by a counterattack. How inconceivable was this? Had Yi Futian been hiding his true ability all this while? This was his final thought. The next moment, Yang Dongqing's figure immediately turned to dust. It was as though he had never existed. Yang Dongqing died. From the very beginning, Yi Futian had been observing Yang Dongqing ever since he allowed him to bring one person into Eastern Deity Island. Yi Futian wanted to see whether or not he would make a move on Eastern Deity Island. How could Yi Futian have possibly been unprepared? He had always been wary of Yang Dongqing. The person who Yang Dongqing brought to Eastern Deity Island was also his disciple, and not his heir. Emperor Helian and Beigong Ao had both brought their heirs. At this crucial moment, as expected, Yang Dongqing had tried to kill Yi Futian. It was a prime opportunity to eliminate Yang Dongqing to prevent future danger. The expression of Yang Dongqing's disciple changed drastically. He looked at Yi Futian and said, "This matter has nothing to do with me." The musical notes of the Great Path swept out, and Yi Futian immediately killed him. When Emperor Helian saw this scene, his heart shuddered. Fortunately, they had decided to become friends with Yi Futian back then, and not to become his enemies. This mysterious fellow with extraordinary talent caused others to be in awe of his talent, as well as make others cautious of him. The image of Jun clan from Penglai Deity Island has been completely ruined by you, Yi Futian said nonchalantly then. His tone was full of mockery. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Failed. Failed. Jun Shuyan's expression was one of gloom. As Divine Will 7th Realm, he had released a fatal blow from such a close distance. Yet he failed? Yi Futian was just a lower Renhuang. Even if his Divine Wheel of the Great Path was perfect, it was still only in the 3rd realm. Yang Dongqing was upper Renhuang of the 7th realm. He had unleashed a blow with all his might. So how could it be that he was not dead yet? Like Yang Dongqing, Jun Shuyan thought that this blow would, at the very least, severely injure Yi Futian if not destroy him. But the result was that Yang Dongqing was killed by Yi Futian instead. Even though he may have used a divine item to protect himself, he shouldn't be able to defend against this blow. But no matter what, everything was now an incontrovertible reality. All the cultivators had participated, followed by more assassins, but all were unsuccessful. Previously, he himself was humiliated by Yi Futian, and everything that had happened really brought tremendous shame to the Jun family. At this moment, the light of the golden runes shone brightly on the cliff, as the sound of Buddha lingered. The image of Buddha remained elusive as endless divine brilliance showered upon Yi Futian, bathing him within it so that he became sacred and majestic. Buzz! A horrible wave of sound rolled out. In an instant, many people in the vicinity lost hearing, and it was difficult for them to hear anything for a while. Simultaneously, their spiritual souls were greatly shaken, and all the cultivators guarded their minds to protect their spiritual souls. All of them had released the will of the way to the extreme to resist this sonic attack. Kill! Yi Futian spat, and the aura of horrific slaughter exploded in the sky, accompanied by the rhythm of the great path. And his word was the law. The rhythm fluctuated toward in the distance, attempting to slaughter the cultivators brought here by Jun Xiuyan. Back! A cultivator of Upper Renhuang 8th Realm shouted, and the sound exploded like thunder, shaking in the ears of all the cultivators, awakening them. At the same time, cultivators were guarding in front of Jun Xiuyan, as the light screen of the great path shrouded this space, protecting Jun Xiuyan. An invisible storm of rhythm swept out, and those cultivators who guarded in front of Jun Xiuyan groaned, as they felt their spiritual souls trembling. Even some upper-level Renhuang were bleeding from the corners of their mouths, their faces pale, as the force knocked them backward. At the same time, the light screen of the great path was shattered by the sound waves. Its force blasted upon Jun Xiuyan. Even as Jun Xiuyan released a divine item for protection, the force was enough to knock him into flying out, and he spat out several mouthfuls of blood. Retreat! The group evacuated backward quickly. All the cultivators brought by Jun Xiuyan were attacked indiscriminately by the sound waves, just as the golden Buddha light swept over their bodies. When the light screen dissipated again, many cultivators fell. Their bodies fell from the sky, and among them, many were Renhuang killed on the spot. There were even some middle Renhuang among the dead. The will of the rhythm from the cliff was horrific beyond their imagination. The remaining cultivators had all stepped back to somewhere far away, lengthening their distance from the cliff. Many of them were also injured, their faces were pale, and their spiritual souls were still shaking. When they looked in front, they saw rolls of light screens sweeping out on top of the cliff, so they continued to retreat, leaving the area that was covered by the power of the great path from the cliff. Traces of divine light of the great path poured directly into Yi Futian's body, and did not continue to chase them. The space in front of the cliff was shrouded by the golden Buddha light, which appeared extremely sacred. How powerful! Everyone present was greatly impacted. This rhythm had a terrifying effect. What shocked them the most was that Yi Futian had already had control over the will of the cliff's rhythm, which could be used by him to launch an offensive attack of the great path. Judging from the range of attack that he was able to lock in with his control of the rhythm, they knew that Yi Futian was able to resonate with the cliff. This meant that he was probably already at the point of complete comprehension. Jun Xiuyan couldn't help, but felt that his life was spared. His face was cold and gloomy as he looked into the distance. He was out of the range of the sonic wave attack at the moment. However, today, Jun Xiuyan had suffered total humiliation. In front of Yi Futian, he was totally vulnerable, with no ability to fight back. From the beginning, his opponent had never taken him seriously. Next to him, Upper Renhuang cultivators looked at Jun Xiuyan, and they did not look good. One person crushed such a powerful group while they had suffered many casualties. How humiliating! Furthermore, now they couldn't do anything to Yi Futian at all. They didn't even dare to approach him. Wait until he leaves the cliff. Jun Xiuyan uttered a short sentence. His voice was flat, without joy or sorrow, and no change in emotions could be detected. However, from his eyes, the cultivators around him could see a terrifying determination to kill Yi Futian no matter what. He did not tell them to leave, but ordered everyone to continue waiting here until Yi Futian left the cliff, and then they will kill him for good. Outside the cliff, Yi Futian would not expect to survive. He would be watching closely here. Those around him nodded. Their eyes were equally indifferent. They turned to cast a glance at where Futian was, standing quietly in the void waiting. In front of the cliff, everyone who saw it looked a little weird, but then they immediately understood Jun Qiuyan's intention. They were lying in wait for Futian there, until he finished cultivating. Unless Futian never left the cliff. As soon as he left, he would no longer be able to take advantage of its power. How would he face the cultivators that came with Jun Qiuyan? It seemed that Jun Qiuyan's disgrace, coupled with heavy casualties, had contributed to his determination that Futian must die before he could feel vindicated. Even if he were not seeking the Great Path's opportunities, he would cut Futian down. Emperor Helion and Beigong Ao both frowned. If so, it was indeed somewhat concerning. Futian didn't seem to mind. He glanced at the crowd, and his gaze paused momentarily on Yunjia, causing Yunjia to heighten his awareness. He had come with Jun Qiuyan originally, but he did not attack Futian. Everything that happened afterward had also shocked him to the core. Futian had comprehended the rhythm of the cliff and slaughtered many cultivators. Then he cut down Yang Dongqing, which forced other cultivators, such as Jun Qiuyan, to evacuate. They could ill afford Futian's attack now. However, Futian merely glanced at him, then turned his head back to look at the cliff, continuing to cultivate. As if everything that had just happened was a dream, everyone watched with a sense of disbelief. Futian was surprisingly casual about all this. Beigong Ao wore a puzzled look. He had sensed that Futian had never considered the other person a serious opponent. Just as when he was at Dongyuan Pavilion, he had not really worried about Lu Han and Yang Dongqing. Could it be that he was equally unconcerned with the top forces from Penglai continent? His instinct was that he was correct in his estimation. But no matter how talented Futian was, where did he get his confidence from? Next to Futian, Shengguan Chuya glanced at Yunjia and said, "Are you going to continue to cultivate here or go by yourself?" Yunjia looked at her and said with a smile, "Shengguan, what's it to you? I don't think you would dare to cause any trouble now," Shengguan Chuya sneered. She then looked at Futian and transmitted her voice. "If there is any trouble from the Jun family, I can help. Even if you leave the cliff, it isn't impossible to fight." "Thank you, but no need," Futian replied, causing a curious look on Shengguan Chuya's face. "Those men around Jun Qiuyan are mighty. Once you leave the cliff, it will not be easy to deal with them, and he meant to kill you. Moreover, Yunjia is another person to watch out for. Can you handle it by yourself?" Shengguan Chuya continued. She wasn't questioning him, but just wanted to remind him, and at the same time, maybe get on his good side. This would be more or less beneficial for her cultivation, and in comprehending the cliff. "Thank you for the reminder." Still, Futian replied rather flatly, then continued to look at the cliff to comprehend and cultivate, making Shengguan Chuya feel a little speechless. No one had ever ignored her like this ever. She realized that Futian was rather unwilling to respond to her. She was a little depressed by this realization. But in this instant, the cliff lit up with a brilliant divine light. The sight of it melted away Shengguan Chuya's dissatisfaction again. This guy had such unparalleled comprehension. It would be to her interest if she followed along with him in cultivation. This confrontation seemed to have calmed down for the moment, as Jun Qiuyan and the others were waiting in the distance, dared not to come any closer. Futian was cultivating quietly, without being distracted, and cared not for any outside matters, as if everything had nothing to do with him. The notes of the great path on the cliff were getting stronger, as divine glory bloomed, and the sound of Buddha lingered. Over time, the notes on the cliff seemed to have become one, and the Vajra Buddha that appeared on the cliff was becoming clearer. What was more striking was that the golden notes of the great path were also surrounding Futian, resonating with the notes on the cliff. It was as if they had integrated into one. There was even the shadow of a golden Buddha that seemed to appear, rather elusively, above Futian's body. The elusive image of the Buddha superimposed on his body. It was as if Futian was transformed into a holy and solemn Buddha. Buzz! Endless brilliant glory bloomed from the top of the mountain cliff, extremely radiant. Everyone looked up in the direction of the cliff, and saw a dazzling golden Buddha light, as the sound of Buddha lingered between the heaven and the earth. In the void, it seemed that a giant Buddha appeared. At the same time, there was a rumbling sound as the cliff trembled violently. What's going on? Everyone was confused. Golden runes on the cliff continued to fly toward Futian, and even fly directly into his body. Rays of golden glory were shining. All those characters of the Great Path flew out of the cliff. All of them merged inside of Futian. Everyone had a questioning look on their faces. The cliff was trembling more and more violently, and when all the characters had flown into Futian's body, a loud cracking sound was heard, as cracks now appeared on the cliff, which continued to shatter and eventually collapsed. The cliff was destroyed. This opportunity of the Great Path disappeared. Many watched this sight dumbfounded. Some cultivators who had been here several times were stunned, watching all this happening without a word. Again, Emperor Helion and Beigong Ao watched with some puzzlement. Previously at Sword Mountain, Futian had already done something like this before. Was he about to repeat it? He was cultivating while leaving no room for the others to do the same. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. All the cultivators in front of the cliff witnessed its destruction and were speechless. It was pulverized and broken. All the cultivators in front of the cliff witnessed its destruction and were speechless. It was pulverized and broken. This opportunity of the Great Path disappeared just like that. And now, no one else would have the chance to receive it. This also meant that Futian had already inherited this opportunity of the Great Path and was in complete control of it. It was precisely because of the existence of such a genius talent that the opportunity of the Great Path now belonged to just one person, and no one else would benefit from it. How heartless. Those cultivators would have nowhere to cultivate now. The opportunity of the great path disappeared, and there was no more chance to comprehend this Vajra demon-slaying rhythm. Shangguan Qiuye looked at the disappearing cliff and felt somewhat lost because it was gone. She had already gotten herself to a good place where she was able to comprehend this cliff's great path gradually. But this was also when Yi Futian had comprehended the opportunity of the great path and absorbed all the notes so that none was left. In the future, there would be no such opportunity. Even if they come again, the opportunity would be no more. Monopolizing the opportunity of the great path all by yourself, amazing. A voice was heard, and the speaker was Yunjia, who had not left. He stood in the void and watched all this taking place quietly. He only spoke when he saw that Yi Futian had made the cliff disappear. Behind Yi Futian, Beigong Ao and the others turned and saw Yunjia, with his arms folded before him, watching all this with great interest. The cliff was gone. Yi Futian had comprehended the opportunity of the great path, but it also meant that he no longer had the cliff as a buffer, and he could no longer use its power, so, when his thought turned to this, he turned his head to glance at a direction in the distance. Sure enough, Jun Qiuyan and the others who had retreated to the distance were now moving forward. They were waiting for a time like this to kill Yi Futian. How could they miss a chance like this? Without the cliff as a shelter, Yi Futian would undoubtedly die. A mighty coercion covered them. Its oppressive power was extremely terrifying. Those around Yi Futian frowned, sensing that something was not quite right. Previously, when Yi Futian made the two attempts to kill the enemy, once was with the sword will of the Sword Mountain, once with the help of the cliff, he had leveraged external forces both times. The opportunity of the great path from Eastern Deity Island itself. Now there were no more external forces to be had, and the enemy had quite a powerful makeup, far surpassing theirs. There could be trouble afoot. With the cliff gone, and none of the people here knew Yi Futian from before, and shared no common interests with him, they would not have any animosity toward Jun Qiuyan as before. It was even possible that they might be displeased with Yi Futian because of the destruction of the cliff. This time, everyone else would probably not interfere. Soon, Jun Qiuyan came to the side and surveyed the crowd. He saw that Yi Futian still had his back turned to him, as if he continued to absorb the notes of the great path that he had swallowed before. Jun Qiuyan's eyes were icy and indifferent. He said coldly, "You impeded me because you wanted to use his comprehension to cultivate. How did that work out for you now?" Everyone was speechless, and they had mixed feelings. They did want to use Yi Futian's power for their own comprehension, and they did benefit from it. But now, everything had turned to dust, and their hopes were dashed. But could this matter be blamed solely on Yi Futian? He had extraordinary and unparalleled comprehension that surpassed everyone else, which allowed him to thoroughly comprehend the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm of the great path that was left on the cliff, absorbing its power and seizing the opportunity. What more could they say about this? Even if there were discontent in their hearts, everything was a foregone conclusion now that could not be changed, and Yi Futian would not be restoring the cliff for them. Jun Qiuyan saw that every one of them was silent as his eyes passed over them. Finally, they landed on Yi Futian and his people, including Beigong Ao and the others. His eyes showed a cold, murderous intent. Now, who else could protect Yi Futian? He looked at Shangguan Qiuye, who was not far away, and saw that Shangguan Qiuye was also looking at Yi Futian, and asked through voice transmission, "Do you need help?" She was still willing to help Yi Futian, who had always been extremely passive in their interactions. Even at a time like this, as long as he was willing to bow, this arrogant and proud man who had categorically rejected her before. What about now? Yi Futian was silent. He seemed to be still cultivating, and streaming light of the great path flowed round him. Silence. Shangguan Qiuye thought. It seems this proud man doesn't want to ask for help, even at a time like this. But when she thought of his refusal before, Shangguan Qiuye said again, through voice transmission, "If you need help, you can nod, and I will help you." She didn't want to believe that Yi Futian would not relent. Yi Futian still did not respond. Clearly, he had heard her, but Shangguan Qiuye's tone was akin to solicitation. She seemed to ask him to beg for her help. This was probably because she was rejected before, and now wanted a chance to win back some dignity.
Yi Futian slowly turned around and cast a glance at Shangguan
still willful, and transmitted
the
his
streaming
light
light
to
to
her
her
in
great
response.
path flowed about
No
him,
need, and submerged
Shangguan
inside his
Qiuya was
body.
taken
Aback for a moment. Her beautiful eyes blinked once as she was looking at Yi Futian. There was a slight change in her eyes. This jerk. Without the power of the cliff, how would you deal with the cultivators of the Jun family? Your people were not at the same level as theirs. Not to mention Yunzhe was still watching on the side. Do you really think you can get away? Shangguan Qiuya said coldly. Yi Futian gave her an odd look and a sideways glance. What's the matter with this woman? She wanted so much for him to ask her for help. Don't bother. Yi Futian responded flatly, and rendered Shangguan Qiuya completely speechless. Anger even flashed across her beautiful eyes. She saw that Yi Futian's talent was extraordinary, and couldn't bear to see him perish here. So she decided to lend a helping hand, while recruiting a friend with an outstanding talent for the Shangguan clan. But she never expected that Yi Futian would completely ignore her kind intentions, not even paying any attention to her. I guess I am overly concerned, Shangguan Qiuya replied coldly. She didn't bother speaking again. She planned to watch as a bystander. She wanted to see how Yi Futian would resolve this situation. Facing Jun Qiuyan's murderous intent, how could he contend with it? Yi Futian walked a few steps forward, raised his head to look into the void ahead, and saw that the Runhuang cultivators brought over by Jun Qiuyan were standing in a mighty line. The great path's oppressive power enveloped the boundless void, so that this space is suffocated with its pressure of might. The cultivators from before had all withdrawn from this space. Soon, only Yi Futian and a few others were left facing such a powerful enemy. Not far behind Yi Futian and the others, an angry Shangguan Qiuya also took her people to some distance away. She was going to watch and see how this proud fellow planned to deal with Jun Qiuyan. Yi Futian raised his head to look at Jun Qiuyan, only to be met by his icy stare full of strong intent to kill. He was looking down at him and said coldly, "You finished cultivating?" Yi Futian nodded. After his arrival, Jun Qiuyan did not rush to make a move, but waited for him to finish his cultivation. Now that the cliff is destroyed and there are no more external forces for you to borrow, what do you think about that? Jun Qiuyan asked again. Do I need to use external forces to kill the likes of you? Yi Futian replied. Jun Qiuyan's eyes focused on Yi Futian. He did not have anyone protecting him at the moment, so that Yi Futian could kill him, even without any external forces. His eyes were icy cold as he ignored Yi Futian's words and continued. Since you made your move that day, you are destined never to leave the Penglai continent alive. Before you were lucky. Now what's your plan to survive? Yi Futian didn't speak, and the aura of great path flowed through his body. Between the heaven and the earth, sounds of Buddha were heard, which turned into invisible fluctuations of rhythm. On his body, a Vajra Buddha seemed to have appeared, with angry eyes, suppressive and overpowering. The body slowly levitated into the air, and a mighty aura bloomed from it. Underneath the light of Buddha, there was also a terrifying and sharp aura, which was an indestructible swordsmanship. It seems that you don't plan to survive at all. Jun Qiuyan said coldly, kill. When the voice fell, the cultivators who had lined up around him unleashed a mighty pressure of the great path at the same time, which flooded toward Yi Futian. In an instant, the great path filled the space with an undeniable presence. However, at the same time, the sound of Buddha continued to linger and resound between heavens and earth, causing the cultivators to frown. Some middle Renhuang felt that they were under very strong pressure, which oppressed their spiritual souls. Jun Qiuyan backed up when he felt that pressure, while a cultivator of the 8th realm guarded in front of him against any sudden attack from Yi Futian. Senior Beigong, much obliged, said Yi Futian, and Beigong Ao nodded in acknowledgement. From where he stood in the air, the mighty power of thunder erupted. Standing there in front of Yi Futian, the body of the thunder god shrouded him, and he was unstoppable. Emperor Helion was guarding Xiaqing Yuan and the others. Yi Futian turned to look at Shangguan Qiuya, who was not far away, and said, "If you want to help, take care of them for me." Although Emperor Helion was guarding them, Yi Futian still worried that the opponents would attack Xiaqing Yuan and the others no matter the cost, hence his request to Shangguan Qiuya. Shangguan Qiuya was taken aback. Yi Futian meant to deal with all these Renhuang just by himself and Beigong Ao. Was this guy crazy? And was this the attitude of asking someone for help? Shangguan Qiuya looked at Yi Futian coldly and saw that he had already turned around, so she replied, "Fine." As soon as she replied, she was immediately upset with herself. Why did she agree so easily to do his bidding? Perhaps she wanted to see how Yi Futian would deal with Jun Qiuyan and the other Renhuang with just 2 people. Boom! The power of 1,000 punishments converged and turned into a thunderous calamity. Thousands of thunderous lightning came down from the sky and swept out. Beigong Ao of the 8th realm now stood proudly in the air, arrogantly and forceful. He had never been in a battle quite like this. Yi Futian asked him to participate, for the 2 of them to fight against multiple Renhuang, and he agreed, seemingly to trust Yi Futian blindly. At the same time, he had always been cautious while conducting business outside, and never had a moment like this. Today, he would completely throw cautions to the wind. When his thought turned to this, he gave out a shout with great pride and passion. But at this moment, the sound of Buddha lingered, and a terrifying sound wave swept out. An ancient Vajra Buddha appeared above the sky, and the anger from the Buddha emitted an invisible rhythm that rendered the space completely quiet. Yi Futian took the initiative and made his move first, which stunned Beigong Ao, who was fully prepared to launch his own attack. In the next moment, many Renhuang were slaughtered while they vomited blood and fell from the sky, as if they couldn't bear even one strike. Beigong Ao looked at this sight speechlessly, a little confused. Shouldn't this be his time to act? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.